Good morning and welcome to the Commissioner meeting this morning. If you will, we will have a moment of silent prayer and pledge of allegiance to the flag after that. And I'd like to ask everybody to keep the people of Ukraine in their prayers. If you will, please join me for silent prayer. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Discussion items, payroll classification study, Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, first, I want to thank you for agreeing to meet this morning. I want to quickly run through a slideshow presentation that I have for the pay and grade study. So it's just going to give you a general overview of why we go through pay and grade studies. It'll give you some overall information, not down to the minutia contained in the pay and grade study. We'll get to that in our next session. Some of this may look familiar. Some of it was data that's been presented to you during the last budget season. So it's been updated. So don't be surprised if some of it looks somewhat familiar. So we have the pay and grade classification study. What is a pay and grade classification study? It's a method for compensating employees for their work based on their job, their qualifications, their years of experience, and other predetermined factors. Each job within the organization is placed at a specific pay grade so that both internal and external equity are balanced. It authorizes payment based on a strategic and mathematical analysis, not an individual employee or departmental basis. When an approval is given for this type of plan, the approval is for the plan and the variable components of the plan. The plan results in the salaries of the individual employees. The county is experiencing difficulty attracting qualified candidates and retaining skilled employees in critical positions due to a pay plan that has not kept pace with changing economic and employment conditions. Pay for some employees has fallen behind that of new hires due to competitive pressures on hiring salaries. The county believes that its salaries have fallen behind the competitive market, as Caswell has lost employees to surrounding organizations for more money. No pay increases have been given in the 5 years leading up to the study. Now, the county did give a cost of living adjustment, or a COLA, in 2017, 2019, and 2020 between 2 and 2.5%, but not to all employees, not to all employees. The county recognizes the need to position itself competitively as competition for skilled employees increases. The county is experiencing problems with salary compression. There are inequities in the current pay plan, with certain positions being undervalued in comparisons with others based on education, experience, and level of responsibility. So I want to talk a little bit about what a COLA is. A COLA, i.e. the 2% that the commissioners have approved in previous years, is a cost of living adjustment. It's not really a raise. It is helpful to allow employees to maintain their current lifestyle. It does not necessarily improve an employee's financial position in life. It usually adjusts for inflation, and it's usually tied to an economic indicator, such as the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So if you have an employee that 1 year ago could buy 1 loaf of bread, 1 gallon of milk, and 1 gallon of gas, and inflation raises 2%, that employee can no longer afford to buy 1 loaf of bread, 1 gallon of milk, and 1 gallon of gas, unless a 2% cost of living adjustment is issued. Are there any questions about that? Hearing none. The Consumer Price Index measures the change in prices paid by consumers for goods and services. The CPI reflects spending patterns for each of 2 population groups: all urban consumers and all urban wage earners and clerical workers. The CPIs are based on prices of food, clothing, shelter, fuels, transportation, doctors, dentists, services, drugs, and other goods and services that people buy for basic day-to-day living. So just as a historical perspective for the CPI indicators, in 2017-18, the CPI rose 2.1%. In 18-19, 2.4%. In 19-20, 1.8%. In 2021, 1.2%. In FY 21-22, 7.5%. The Caswell County COLAs in 17-18, 2.25%. 18-19, 0%. 19-20, 2.25%. 2021, 2%. FY 21-22, 0%. Social Security, on the other hand, has risen 2.8%. 2%, 2.8%, 1.6%, 1.3%, and 5.9%. That's the amount the federal government has increased Social Security recipients' checks in the last 5 years. So the difference in the CPI to Caswell County is 8.5%. The difference in the Social Security is 7.1%. So our employees are 8.5% behind the CPI and 7.1% behind Social Security. And that is simply to maintain the same financial position they had 5 years ago. So in essence, they're able to buy less today than they were 5 years ago. So let's go over what a raise is. A raise is a salary increase. It moves an employee through the salary range. Salary range is mid or medium, midpoint, and maximum. Minimum, medium, and maximum. It improves an employee's financial position in life. They're able to buy more. They're able to do more, go a few more places, send their kids to college, put braces on their child, those kind of things. A raise is usually tied to longevity or performance, not to an economic indicator such as the CPI. What is a salary grade adjustment? It creates the strategic connection of how we compete and drive value through our employees. It establishes appropriate pay grades with required skills. And it compensates employees fairly and equitably for the jobs they perform as compared to others in their field and those in other departments, i.e. an administrative assistant in the administration department would make the same wage as an administrative assistant in the health department or an administrative assistant in building inspections, i.e. they're equal in pay. Are there any questions? So in the current salary study and the manager's recommendation, those making between $20,000 and $60,000 get 94% of the distribution. Those making between 60 and 70 get 1%. Those making 70 and above get 5%. So only 5% go to those making 70 and above. Only 1% goes to those making between 60 and 70. The bulk of the money goes to those making less than $60,000 a year. So weighted average, what's a weighted average? And I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to ask you to look through some of your papers here in a minute. So the employee average compared to the average same employee that does that specific job in other counties, their average in this pay and grade study is 98%. So if somebody was making $100 as an average wage in Rockingham County or Person County, it's set, our salary schedule right now on average is set for our employees to make $98.
That's current.
No,
That's as a result of.
that's as a result of the pay stub. So the employee average compared to the average employee in another county, 98% of what they make. The department head average as compared to the average department head in another county, however, is only 84%. In the state human resources computation, the disparity is even greater. It's 96 versus 80. So there's a 16% difference. Or on the other hand, it's a 14% difference. So department head pay has been devalued as compared to employee averages in the study by an average of 14%. And some of them, as you look through this, some of them as much as 34%. This means that department heads are scheduled to receive on average a 14% lower increase as compared to other comparable positions in other counties as compared to the employee increases. Any questions? All right, so that's the end of my slide. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is this sheet. If you want to look at your handout, that's fine. I'm going to bring it up on this sheet too. And as I explained to the members of the board that are present, a lot of the information that you're looking at today is that the board will look at today is proprietary information that can't really be shared publicly at this time. We will make the PDF versions of what we talk about available, but the actual Excel spreadsheets are not are proprietary information. So commissioners, as you look at that page, obviously you're going to be looking at a little different view than I'm showing. But when we're talking about the department head valuation and the employee employee valuation, let's start on page 1, and you can see the first one, the county manager. All of the recommended salaries are the hiring or minimum amounts. All of the recommended salaries in the study are the minimum amounts or the higher end amounts. So we're never going to be looking at the column that's maximum or actual. So if you see where I've highlighted here, for the average of average county manager pay, and then you look at the Caswell County recommended manager's pay, and you do the math, you get 71%. So what they're saying is they're recommending my salary be set at 71% of what the average county manager makes in the counties that were studied. Are there any questions about that?
The other counties, the comparable counties, are the bordering counties to Caswell.
Well, the border,
Plus.
the other counties are Alamance County, Durham County, Chatham County, Granville County, Guilford County, Orange County, Personham County, and Rockingham County. And if you'll remember, I sent out an email to the board some time ago and said, these are the counties we're studying. If you have any objections, additions, deletions, let me know. We received none. So those are the counties we move forward with.
And those are the counties we lose people to.
Those are the counties we lose people to. So you can see, once again, my salary would be set to 71% as a department head and as a county manager, 71%. You look at the clerk to the board, it's 88%. So it's a higher percentage. You look at the administrative specialist, it's 99%. Senior administrative specialist, 99%. Administrative assistant, 97%. Senior administrative assistant, 97%. Human resources director, 80%. Finance technician, here again, frontline worker, 98%. Senior finance technician, 97%. Payroll specialist, 96%. Deputy finance director, 84%. Finance director, 76%. Do you see where I'm going with this? Do I need to continue through the information? You see department heads are being devalued lower than the frontline employees. So the average salary in other counties for department heads still remains much higher than it does for the department heads in Caswell County. Whereas the employees within the department, their salaries are being brought up almost to the same level as employees in other counties.
In one of these spreadsheets, there were 3 options plus your recommendation. What numbers do these represent?
Those numbers tie back in to these numbers, these grade, salary grade.
This is from the salary study, unaltered with those options and your recommendation.
That's correct.
Okay.
Except for my recommendation. Options 1, 2, and 3 are unaltered. Yes, that's correct.
They're not included in.
They are. So this is what leads to the numbers that get filled in the other spreadsheets. Does that answer your question?
No. These numbers you had, there were in one of these spreadsheets. Caswell County allocation list, you had option 1, 2, 3, and the manager's recommendation.
And Commissioner, this is the spreadsheet he's on.
How do these salaries correlate to the salaries on this sheet?
They work in at providing the minimum salary, and the minimum salary is used as the recommendation for the starting point of these salaries.
It's it's
Right.
before any of these options or your recommendations were applied.
No, it's the basis for the option. That's where the option begins. So if, and we've already used, well, if we were using a finance employee, and let's just use the first finance employee on this spreadsheet, okay? You work your way over, you see a salary of $22,176. And then you look over and they've reclassified the job. The recommended classification is finance technician. And that moves to, the grades are not comparable. So when you see a grade 22 or a grade 15, and then you see a grade 61, don't think they jumped, 30 some grades. That's not the case. They just use the grading scale that the state uses for the state human resources department uses. So you see a grade of 61, and then the minimum, and let me show you this. So here I'm going to unhide. So you can see the higher end rate 26,061, 27,367.64, and 40,394 represent the higher end, the new minimum, and the new maximum for that position.
I don't see those numbers.
No, because they're hidden on the spreadsheet. That's a proprietary information that I'm talking about.
Okay.
So the information from the survey ties in to the recommended grade or salary schedule, which is this. It makes up the salary schedule. It drives the grade list, which drives the class list, which drives the employee distribution, which results in the allocation. So when you're looking at the salary schedule, you can see the salary schedule starts off at grade 50 and a hiring rate at $20,500. Correct? There's, let's just say roughly 4.2% difference between 20,500 and 21,382. 4.2%. 4.2% between the minimum and the next grade. 4.2% between the midpoint and the next grade. 4.2% between the maximum and the next grade. 4.2 between any one of these grades and the one above it. It's 4.2%. It's actually 4.203624. It's a long number. So I'm using 4.2%, but it's roughly 4.2%. So mathematically, 4.2% between every grade. Does that make sense? So it's not it's not, it's a mathematical formula that comes up with the grade that employees are assigned to. So we get to the options 1, 2, and 3. Here again, that's this spreadsheet. So options 1, 2, and 3 were provided by the consultant. I want to talk a minute about the different variables in the spreadsheet. There's several different variables that make up the spreadsheet. There's a minimum cost of living, a COLA, minimum COLA, built in certain options within the spreadsheet. In certain options, there's not. And that minimum COLA can be 0, it can be 2, 5, 7, 9. It can be whatever the board deems appropriate. There is, in certain recommendations, there's a 1% difference for every year of service. Or in another option, there's a 0.75% difference for every year of service an employee has given to the county. So if you worked for the county 10 years, you would go to the minimum of that pay and grade range, and then you would receive a 7.5% increase at the 0.75% on top of the minimum rate. Does that make sense?
No, but spit that out one more time. So
Okay.
I digest properly.
So let's say you're a grade 17. Okay, if you're a grade 17, you would be brought up to the minimum of that grade. Okay, and then say you had been in that position, or you had worked for the county for 10 years. Whether it's in that position or not, you've worked for the county 10 years.
I think, let me ask you a question and it'll kind of get to where I'm going with this. So if an employee has been with the county X number of years and they move into another job, how will that affect their raise? Because
We're going to get to that. That's my next option I'm going to explain.
All right.
So this is simply the length of time you spent with the county. Okay, if you've been employed with the county for 10 years, you get a 7.5% increase based on the longevity you have with the county, on top of the minimum, whatever brought you up to was needed to bring you up to the median or the minimum. Does that make sense? All right. So, and that's an excellent question, John. Another variable in this spreadsheet is what I refer to as a blended years of service option. So, for instance, we may have an employee that worked in one department and then transferred to another department. We may have an employee that moved up through the ranks, for instance, in the sheriff's department or sheriff's office, from a sergeant to a captain. So even though that position changed, those years of service leading up to him or her making captain were definitely beneficial. And we shouldn't just arbitrarily discount those, right? So what we have is a blended rate of service. So follow me with this calculation. If we have an employee that has been employed with the county for 10 years, but has only been in their current position for 2 years, Those two numbers are added together, 10 years and 2 years. That equals 12 total years, right? Then that's divided by 2. And you come up with 6 years of total of the blended rate of service. Does that make sense? So
The employee's been with the county for 10 years total,
10 years total.
in their current position, 2 years.
That's correct.
So you're double counting the last 2 years.
Yes, absolutely. So the total years of service and the years of service in the position are used to formulate a blended rate of service. So we don't discount all of those years that it's taken them to get to that position, but we're still not rewarding the employee for being in that position for that entire length of time. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that? And I can give you some examples.
How about a patrol officer that gets an increase, he's a patrol officer, maybe he advances to sergeant or something.
Yeah, so if we only used years in current position, then he or she would only get credit for when they moved to sergeant. If we used a blended rate of service, it would be like the calculation that I showed before. So let me go down to commissioners. You see the one I have highlighted here. So we have an employee with a total years of service 6, years of service in their current position 1, to make 7, right? That if you add those together, that comes up to 7. You divide them by 2, and it gives you 3.5 years, a blended rate of service of 3.5 years. Do you need to look at more examples? Everybody got that?
Well, I don't understand why if you got 10 years of service and you divide it in 2 and that comes up to 5 years.
Yeah, you're adding the years in your current position to that and then dividing it by 2.
Okay.
So if you've been in the same position, if you were hired in the same position, that you currently have and you've worked for the county for 10 years, your blended rate of service would be 10, because you would take 10 and 10 and add it together to get 20, divide it by 2 and get 10.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Okay.
Brian, on the patrol officers, go over what other counties are paying and what the salary study recommends on that.
So Sheriff, what's give me just a minute to find it, Commissioner Carter. Oh, that's not good.
You need to know our current salary.
No, I'll have that. I just have to find it.
I'll tell you why I'm going with that and why I asked you about it, because I've known in the years past, I've been on the board, and we always hire somebody and train them, then they move to another county that pays more. And of course, you can't fault them for that.
So what would that ranking be, Sheriff?
Deputy 1.
Deputy 1, deputy Sheriff Corporal,
One, yeah.
Deputy Sheriff, the Caswell County current is 33,948. The average as of the date of the study was 38,537. And the recommended is 36,962, which is 96% of the total of 96% of the average.
Deputy Sheriff Corporal,
No, deputy sheriff.
It's on the previous page.
And that's the patrol officer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it would be a regular deputy sheriff.
That's correct.
But you said, now, what you gave was what they recommended was 36,000. Is that correct?
Well, it's $4 from being 37,000.
Okay. And
No,
the
I'm
other-
sorry. It's $38 from being $37,000.
all right, and the other counties, is that in line with the other counties?
Well, it's 96% of what other counties are paying as of the date of this study.
on average.
On average. Other counties, other counties are paying 40,523, 36, 485, 42, 316, 36, 286, 37, 200, 39, 978, 36, 884, 38, 620, which averages 38, 537.
And that's for a regular patrol officer.
Yes,
Okay, so that, with the salary study, that'll put them up about 38, you say?
37.
37, okay. Well, maybe we'd be able to keep some of that salary then.
Well, back to my original point, the goal of the salary study is to help to attract and retain employees, but it's also to spread, to give an equal distribution across the salaries for their experience, for their job, for their amount of responsibility. So I know that we are currently seeing disparities in the sheriff's office and in other emergency services departments too. But we're seeing a lot of larger disparities in other departments within the county. So we need to make sure that when we're taking care of emergency services, which we definitely need to do, but when we're taking care of emergency services, we're also taking care of our other employees equally, equitably across the salary scale.
Yeah, I understand that and I agree with you, but where we have a turnover, we have the most turnover in the sheriff's department, the EMS. Because over the years, we hire somebody in the EMS and sheriff's department, and they'll work maybe 6 months a year, then they'll move on to a county that pays more,
Yeah, we do see that quite often.
And I know all departments are important, but those two departments, the sheriff's department and the EMS, is where we have the high turnover.
Yes, that's correct. But we also see similar turnover rates in here recently in IT. There's a lot of new positions that have to be filled within DSS, within the health department. We see turnover within our library. I think we have 3 not senior employees. So we do see a lot of turnover. I think our finance department is about 60% employees that have been with the county less than 5 years.
Yeah, I'm thinking I think that's correct. Mhm.
Yeah, so we see that in a lot of departments other than emergency service, but it's really prevalent in emergency services because there's always a demand for those employees. Within other counties, everybody's always looking to fill sheriff's offices, positions, deputy positions, EMS, EMT, paramedic positions, and telecommunicator positions. So you're exactly right.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to take up much time on it, but it was kind of concern on my mind that we was losing employees with the sheriff's department and the EMS, because, you know, they just like I've seen over the years, and that, you know, they'll come on and maybe work. And it costs a lot of money for the county. Like when you hire a deputy sheriff, it costs a lot of money to equip that deputy is automatically $5,000 when you buy the uniform and all the equipment, and then they stay 6 months and move on, and that stuff just, you know, is we spent that money on it and we stuck with it.
Yeah, there definitely is a cost to the county being a training ground for other jurisdictions.
And I know we're a small county, we can't pay as much as the others, you know, and we have to take that in consideration on tax base and everything, but maybe now with this, it seems like this is a good range. Maybe we'd be able to keep those employees now.
I certainly hope so.
I don't want to take a lot of time up in talking about it now, but at a later time, I want to discuss possibly raising that entry level pay for the sheriff's deputies, $36,962 versus Rockingham's $38,620. I just think we're getting put at too much of a competitive disadvantage, and with the money that has to be paid out, as you already stated, $5,000, and you lose it, like the vest that they have is custom made to the officer. So if you hire someone else coming in, they can't use that. We got to figure into the equation the unrelated cost besides what it is just actually pay that salary, and try to work with that, in my opinion, to do better than what we're doing about it.
So, and I would agree. I think though, when you look at the salary and grade plan, if you adjust one grade within that, the sheriff's office, the other grades automatically adjust too. If you don't adjust the other grades, you what you see is salary compression. So what's the next position up after?
Cool.
So you lessen that gap between deputy sheriff and corporal. So that gap decreases if you raise this one and don't raise this one. And that creates less of an incentive for your deputy to want to move to corporal, because there's not as much of incentive there. So what you see is salary compression.
But you see a higher hiring rate that brings more quality candidates to Castle County by bringing that up. We could go back and forth on it. It'll take too much time here. We'll get to it at a later time. There's a lot of pros and cons both ways, but I want to talk about it another time.
Yeah, I honestly believe that our emergency services people should afford just about everything that we can pay them, that we can afford to pay them. They do a great job, and they protect us every day. I'm very thankful that we have them. So I totally agree with you. So I think we were talking about variables before within the spreadsheet. So, and I just explained what a blended rate of service is. So that same 1%, 0.75%, and 0.5% can be added to that same equation for the blended rate of service. whether you either get 1% for every year that the blended rate of service says you have, or 0.75% or 0.5%. Okay, so the last variable that I want to talk about is the percent applied to the salary schedule as a whole. So if you look at your salary schedule, correct? Does everybody see the sheet that I'm talking about? Should be just one page. I don't know that I see it. You don't have this? I don't. Yes. I don't think they got past that.
What did you? You're special.
Just got lucky.
Thank you. So, so you see on my screen over to the right, 20,500. 99% of 20,500 is 20,295. And I've done that calculation all the way down to 90%. So if I go in, and John, to your point, if I go in to that minimum rate, right, and I adjust that to, let's just pick 98%, which is 20,090. Now watch up here and see how this affects the entire range. It changed everything, every hiring rate, every minimum, every midpoint, every maximum. It changes it. So that's another variable in the system that we can use, that can be used, that results in the overall cost of the implementation. So I'm going to change this back to 20,500.
Well, go over to the sheriff's, since you're doing that on the verb, go over to the sheriff's department. Let's do it on that.
Well, the sheriff's department is included in this.
Okay.
So this applies to the entire sheriff's department, and it applies to every county employee. And here again, it's equitable across the scale, according to the job that they do, their qualification, their years of experience, and other predetermined factors. You want to make sure that it's equitable across all of those variables.
See, my feeling on this too, once we do the salary study, because I know you asked a couple of years ago for, figuring we was doing the budget, $250,000, and we approved it, but if we do this salary study, I don't want to see us coming back in another year or two doing another salary study.
Well, on average, salary studies should be completed every 4 to 5 years. Every 4 to 5 years would require a reset or at least a check-in on your pay and grade system. So I think it needs to be done every 4 to 5 years.
Well, that's okay if we do that, but I'm talking about every year or two. We don't need to be coming back doing it.
Well, I think on a yearly basis, what the commissioners or what the board should be concerned about is the inflation rate. And that's the consumer price index that I spoke about earlier. So if you can tie your COLA increases to the CPI, and that COLA affects your grade or your grade scale as a whole. So if the board says we're going to apply a 2% COLA, that 2% COLA is not applied to each individual employee. It is applied to the grade scale, and then the grade scale is applied to the employees' pay. So it brings employees up 2%, but it's applied to the scale, not to the employee.
And another thing, we got to, you're talking about every 5 years, so, you got to figure out how you're going to pay for it.
Right, and that's a great point. So that moves me on to,
Brian, one more question.
yes, sir,
What was the cost of this salary study?
$20,000. The MAPS group is designed to provide counties with salary studies and salary information on a lower cost basis. They want the counties that are small rural counties like us to be able to afford to do these salaries every 4 to 5 years, just like the larger counties do. So we don't fall behind the way we have in the past. A comparable study performed in, Guilford County or Rockingham County could cost $50,000 to $100,000 easily. The last salary study that we did, which excluded emergency services, I think we paid close to $30,000 for it. The sheriff's office had done a salary study a year earlier and had paid $15,000 for it. That included 911 too. And EMS had done a salary study a year earlier than that. So all of those total, we probably paid $65,000 for those studies.
One more thing. I see the other counties listed, Guilford, Orange, others, and I know that their cost of living is a whole lot higher than what it is to live in Castle County. Is there any kind of formulation that you're figuring in all these figures you're giving us that takes into account that factor?
Well, the cost of living is a really interesting point, especially in rural communities and especially in Castle County. And the reason it's especially interesting in Castle County is because of the lack of available housing stock. When you look at the cost of living, really the differentiating factor is housing. But with a lack of available housing stock for professionals, you don't see that. For instance, most new professionals moving to this area end up building rather than purchasing a home. They purchase land and build a home rather than purchase a home because there's just no available housing stock. So even though you look and you hear that the cost of living is lower in rural communities, that usually equates to housing, but that's not necessarily transferable to Castle because of the lack of housing stock. When you look at gas, we pay the same thing for gas that most other urban consumers pay. And we have to drive further to get to work than most other urban consumers do.
You haven't traveled to Raleigh lately, have you?
Well, I haven't traveled through Raleigh. And your job is a great example. I mean, you drive from here to all over the place. Whereas if you lived in an urban, rural or urban community, you might not have to travel as far. And then again, with your job, you might. But the travel distance for rural commuters is greater than those of urban commuters in most cases. And that's not just for work. That's if you want to shop, if you want to eat, if you want to basically do anything outside of your normal daily routine, you have to do that. The other factors that play into that are land and available resources. So most urban communities have public water, public septic, and sewer. In rural communities, you don't. So you have to maintain a well. If the water's not great, you have to buy filters and purifiers and things like that, which a lot of our employees do in our county. And there's a cost of maintaining the land. So you usually do wind up with more acreage in a rural community than you would in an urban community. But because you have that acreage, you have to maintain that acreage, which is an additional cost. So while I understand, and you look at the reports and you see that living in rural communities is supposed to be cheaper, many times it's not, because the differentiating factor is housing. Housing is in Caswell is not, there's no housing stock. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't apply. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry, that's a hot point for me. So I kind of went on a rant. I'm sorry.
I'll answer it in this fashion. It's good for now. We'll get back to it later. I don't want to type all the time, going back and forth on it, but I have definite thoughts on your comments and I have some replies, but I'm not going to talk it here today.
Gotcha. So does anybody remember where I was at?
You're going through the variables on the variables.
Okay, so I'm finished with the variables. Those are the variables. So you can see if we go back here. And okay, let's go here. And you can see one of the things the salary study did is totaled up the amount of increase that we would see in employees paid, right? But it did not total up the amount of that we would see with employees paid plus benefits. So this number down here for each option represents the total expenditure for the county with those benefits being FICA and retirement and things like that included.
That's not on here,
So it's not.
so I don't need to go look.
No. So I want you to look at that number, right? You can see the
I can't
number.
even see that.
See the number here
I
that's,
can,
okay. So if we go back here, and this is the variable, I'm gonna take this down to 97%, which is 19,885. Okay, then we move back to this spreadsheet. You see how that adjusts the overall average. In all three of these. So those are the type of variables that I'm talking about. So then we get to the point of how you're going to pay for it. So as commissioners, as you know, we receive we're scheduled to receive an additional $2.2 million in American Rescue Plan funds, correct? Correct, everybody agree with that? We're scheduled to, when, Jennifer, July? We can apply for that in July, and the last tranche came fairly quickly. So the $2.2 million. The new final guidance, if you remember before, I talked to you about the interim final guidance. They've come out with the final guidance. And it says you can take up to $10 million. Hey, counties, you can take up to $10 million of your ARPA money and count it as lost revenue without having to provide a calculation, because there was a calculation that was like about 3 pages long, and you had to make certain determinations on a departmental level and then on a governmental level overall to be able to come up with that lost revenue figure before. And I think they saw that that was too burdensome for counties to have to do. So they said, you can take up to $10 million in your ARPA money and just count it as lost revenue. You don't have to do the calculation. You still have to do some reporting, but you can count up to $10 million as lost revenue. So when you use that money and when you apply it as lost revenue, you can put it into your general fund and use it for any governmental purpose, any approved governmental purpose. And salaries is one of those governmental purposes. So let's go across the spreadsheet. So I've told you that if the board is willing to approve the salary study, that we would like to put that in place as of March 5th. So if we use that date, we would need approximately $250,977 for the remainder of this year. And you can see that's over here, needed per year. It's not on your spreadsheet. It's only up here. So $250,977. And due to the debt service reduction this year, due to the detention center financing. So everybody remember last year, we went through a process and we refinanced the detention center. And that refinancing of the detention center saved us $120,000 total over the remaining balance of that loan. Well, that resulted in roughly $20,000 a year in savings, right? So we saved $20,000 a year by refinancing the detention center last year. So that's where that $20,000 comes from. The health department home health sale resulted in approximately a $250,000 saving per year for the county. The health department fund balance. The health department has a fund balance.
Excuse me, what was the figure again you just said from the health department? Is that the recurring savings of?
Yeah, approximately $250,000. Right, Jennifer? So the health department has a fund balance. And out of that fund balance, they could pay the salaries for 3 years for their employees. They couldn't because of the way their programs are set up and because of the way they have to spend their money. That money would have to be applied to their employees and their programs. But they could use that money to pay for the increases for their employees for the first 3 years.
That's just a crutch though, because after 3 years, the taxpayers of the county are gonna have to pick that up. So I don't see how you're gonna figure that in.
I'll get to that.
Way to pay for it.
I'll get to that.
All right.
That's what you're exactly right. That's what we need is a crutch. We need a crutch today. So you're right, but I'll get to that and how we pay for it overall.
And you can figure on this year, Brian, the sheriff's department's got 9 cars. Well, they might not all be sheriff's department. Anyhow, it's 9 vehicles out there in the impound lot, and they've assured me they run good and everything. And you know, the way the economy is, and you can't buy new cars, and used cars are real high. So once we get those 12, when I went down and talked to Melissa several months ago, and I said it's not enough to do an auction for 9 cars, but once they get them 12 cars in, and you be able to sell them 12 used cars plus the 9, that's 21 vehicles you'll have to sell. I'm thinking that should generate around 25,000 for the county,
Yeah,
just on cars alone, not counting what else they got to sell.
yeah, that's correct. So then we have a budget reduction of $200,000. I spoke to what I had dubbed the big four. The big four departments: the sheriff's office, the health department, DSS, emergency services. Because realistically, most of the county's money is allocated to those departments because of the number of employees they have, because of the services they provide, and just because, you know, they interact with the public on a daily basis, more so than a lot of our other departments. And we have spoken, and the sheriff's department has been very good about letting me know that they believe that there's some budget reductions that they can make. EMS has done the same. Health department's already putting in $250,000 worth of savings from the sale of home health. I'm sure they'll be able to contribute a little bit more. And the other county departments, I think we can get to $200,000 worth of budget reductions.
So what are these mainly coming out of? What are these budget reductions?
Well, some of it, it'll come out of several different line items. I can't tell you that there's going to be a 10% cut in travel and training, and it's going to come up to $200,000. I think you have to look at that on a departmental basis. Some of it may come out of postage. Some of it may come out of travel and training. Some of it may come out of,
And that's my point. I mean, we have to realize with travel and training,
I agree.
with the price of gas going up, it's costing us more. So what I don't want to get into is we're counting on $200,000 and all of a sudden
It's not there.
it's not there.
I understand.
You know, we have to remember these are variables that we're looking at in budget reductions.
Yeah, budget reduction, I'll wholeheartedly agree that is a variable.
And I think we have to consider too, even in training, what we don't want to do is sacrifice the service that our citizens get by not training our employees as they need to be trained. And if new training comes up that costs more, we just need to remember that, because we want our people trained properly. And so, okay.
So, and then you look at the ARPA funds that are necessary to fulfill that for that specific year in the next column up here. And not till 2025 do we see a revenue increase. And I'll get to the revenue increase in a minute. But then we have the enterprise funds. We have CATS and solid waste. CATS and solid waste are self-sustaining departments. So they'll have to share the burden of paying their increases in salaries. And I've spoken to both the solid waste director and the CATS director. They will both believe that they would be able to do that without an increase in fees for services.
Brian, I gotta say, I'm skeptical on that, and I know I'm open a can of worms, but how much money did we spend for the additional equipment, extra hauling fees for the trash coming out of solid waste? Are you sure they're gonna be able to come up with a savings after we put, what, 300,000 in extra hauling fees and right at $250,000 down on equipment? I mean, that was an unexpected overrun of over $500,000, and now they're going to be able to produce a savings that's going to figure into this, and we can rely on it.
So the savings for both departments is, for both of those departments, is $50,000. So, yeah, I think it's, when you look at CATS, let's just see which one will come. Soil and water, economic development. Solid waste. The total increase for solid waste would be $27,004.
How are we on, have we took any money out of fund balance this year? How are we on fund balance?
We're actually doing pretty well on fund balance. I asked the finance director yesterday to tally our accounts, and we took into account what we have outstanding for the school, and it looks like we're at about 23% fund balance.
As a total fund balance or?
That's total fund balance.
So what is
We haven't worked it down that far.
down to the, okay. Okay,
Our available fund balance usually runs somewhere in the range of 12 to 13%.
so here's my question. This calculation that we just looked at, is that based on option 1 of this study?
No, option 4.
Option 4,
Management
your
recommendation.
recommendation? Okay. I'm hoping it's based on 1, reduce it a little bit.
Well, it's transportation. I'm sorry, I was looking for CATs. And I think it's, or no, maybe it's transit. Yeah, transit is $22,189 to total roughly $50,000.
And the lap salaries, is this based on the average of what we have, or?
No, it's not. It's actually a very, very low conservative figure. And I'm in DSS. So if you look at the spreadsheet that we're looking at now, the gray and the red are DSS employees. The red indicates a vacant position. So in DSS right now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vacancies. Sheriff, do you know how many vacant positions you have now? So the sheriff's department has 6. So that's 14. I know we had, Jim, you got 5. So that's 19. I know we've got 1 in IT, and there's you know, being more, Mindy. We have 1 in finance, sorry. 1 in maintenance, 2 actually in maintenance. So that's 20, 22. So currently we have 22 and an average salary 22 times 28,000. That's $616,000 a year. I know, I at least hope we're not going to have all of those vacancies for a complete year, but even 2 months of those vacancies would result in $100,000 lapse salary number. And Sheriff, how long does it usually take you from the time you have an open position to fill it?
Year.
So it usually takes a year, Jennifer? About a year. So, I mean, I think $100,000 is a very conservative figure.
Well, it's my position kind of, if you got 6 or 7 positions like in DSS and they hadn't been, and they've been vacant for 6 or 7 months, I don't think we need those positions if they're 6 or 7 months old.
Well, I think what we just heard the sheriff and the health director say is that it takes about a year to fill those positions. So, and
Yeah, but
think
what I'm saying, if you got, like DSS, you said you had 6 or 7 vacant positions. They've been vacant for over 7 months. I don't think we need to fill them. I don't think we need to fill those positions. That's just my point on how anybody else feels.
Well, and I'll speak to DSS a little bit, just because they've been vacant doesn't mean they haven't tried to fill it. They're not getting the applications like everybody else. I think Rockingham, I counted up, has 14 DSS vacancies. But I understand what you're saying, but if those positions are necessary for that department, if you cut them and do away with them completely, then they have no chance to hire those people. I mean, if the sheriff needs 5 deputies,
I know you
and
don't
you cut them,
can't
then
just-
he's got to come back to us and ask for us to reinstate those positions.
That's right. We can just freeze them.
well, regardless, if you cut the positions or if they remain vacant, the money still remains unspent.
Right.
So that's why we're saying lapse salaries with this. I'm not advocating to cut any positions, but what I'm saying is every year we're going to see a minimum of $100,000 in lapse salaries.
I think what Mr. Carter is getting at is if the position has not been filled for a prolonged period of time, and the department has ran fine without that position being filled, isn't it evidence in itself that that position may need to be looked at as a viable opportunity to do away with the position and take the savings you would reap from that and put it toward the raises where you can better compensate the people that are doing all the work in the county?
Social services uses overtime, paying overtime.
Well, maybe not in that particular one, but in other areas where it's taking place.
Well, here again, I'm not advocating for us to cut any positions at all. What I would say is DSS is a department that doesn't report to me. They report to the DSS board. If we have 2 commissioners that serve on that board, I think they could talk to their board about that issue and see what their board's recommendation is and bring it back to the Board of Commissioners.
My thoughts is just simply that if you have extra openings that are not being filled and they're able to continue on and get the job done without. Obviously, people in that department are taking on a greater workload and they're getting the work done. Well, if you compensated them better for doing that and showing that initiative and being able to do their job under a adverse set of situations, and you do away with that position, you're giving them more money for being proactive and doing a better job. But when you cut this other position out, you're not only doing away with that salary, but you're doing away with the benefits associated with it. So it's an overall win for any department that could do that because their employees make more money and it kind of saves money as well.
I understand the theory behind that.
All right, we'll go to the next.
Yep.
But I would say that in some departments, money is not necessarily the main reason they will leave. And DSS is a prime example. Those people are overworked because they don't have these other positions filled.
Well, maybe.
And I'm sure Sheriff Burden could speak to the same issue.
I understand, Mr. Owen. I got that, and that's the same thing I told Mr. Jeffrey. Said maybe not in that department, but in other departments, if it's working, then we could better compensate people and save money in the process.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's a win-win for everybody involved.
But what I'm trying to say is just because they're getting stuff done doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to run efficiently and effectively. Even with an increased salary, and it would depend on, how much they're getting increased. I mean, that's the reason that the DSS, they are paying overtime for these people. That they have no choice, because if they don't work overtime and get this done, it's not going to happen. They just don't have enough time during the day to do their job and the extra work because they don't have those positions.
Well, Barry, it'd be something that have to be looked at on an individual basis within each
And I think that's,
Separate department.
and I think that's the
Yeah.
board that would have to look at each of those positions and determine whether they're needed or not.
But I don't want to open up a can of worms today. We just get through what we're doing. We'll talk about it more later.
So if we put this salary study in and, man, we hire 12 additional people. How does that affect this lapsed salaries?
It doesn't,
Doesn't affect it.
because we still have, I think we said 22. So we still have 10 positions that are unfilled. It takes 3 positions per year on average to build up to the $100,000 average. So we're only talking about 3 positions for an entire year to reach the $100,000. So, and I can't remember a year in the 7 years that I've been here that we haven't had at least 3 full-time positions vacant for an entire year in total. Can y'all,
And I would, I know.
Jennifer, Sheriff? No.
We got sidetracked because so many other questions came at you after I asked mine, but you never replied to me on the $500,000 overrun for the solid waste department and how that figures in. The, what, 250,000 for the equipment, 300,000 hauling fees, and not picking on that particular department. What I'm trying to say here is this: you're doing a lot of projection about what's going to happen and how this will be able to get savings here or there. The registered deeds was flooded out here recently, and that's going to cost what, 30,000, 40,000?
$5,000. I had told you I would be surprised if $30,000 would fix it. So that, I understand where you're coming from. But they chose a different tact to go in and fix that.
Good.
That I think, our interim maintenance director, BJ Powell, I think he did an excellent job in working with, I think it was Tar Heel Basement. And they come up with an alternative solution that probably saved us $25,000, $30,000.
Good. Love to hear that. But back to the other is this. My point in the whole thing and bringing it all up is unexpected expenses coming up. I don't want to see us looking forward and taking so many potential savings from here, and this one might happen here, and this one might happen there, and then some calamity happens and we have to come up with the money to take care of it. We need to be able to actually have a nice cushion to absorb things like that as well.
So the LGC requires us to have an 8% fund balance. 8%, and just so everybody understands, 8% fund balance is equivalent to about 3 months of operating expenses, right? So we're required to have about 8% in fund balance. We currently have about 23.3% in fund balance, and that's usually about what we average on a yearly basis. So we're well above our fund balance, and these projections allow us not to touch our fund balance. As a matter of fact, these projections allow us to put $1.2 million in our fund balance.
And I want to say something, Brian, about this board and the previous board. I think the commissioners have done real well getting the fund balance up, because 16 years when I came on the board, you talking about that 8%, we was getting letters that we were at 8%. And then gradually over the years, the board has done a fine job, and I think we've done a fine job that we've got our fund balance up now. But I remember that 8% when I first came on the board 16 years ago. We was getting those letters about 8%. Them board graduates, and this board hit over the last 4 years, we've improved the fund balance, and we've got it up. And I think we've done excellent. I think the commissioner's done an excellent job on that.
So if you remember, I talked about the county getting $2.2 million in American Rescue Plan funding that we will be able to apply as lost revenue. Any of those funds that are not used as part of the salary study will be available for any governmental purpose. So that those will go to increase our fund balance. So we're not using the cushion we've got for the calamity that you're speaking of. So let me get to the revenue increase, because that, for me, that's the exciting part, is seeing increased revenues within the county. And these increased revenues, in my way of thinking, are being done the correct way. This is the way we need to increase our revenues. So I've been in consultation with the tax director. He's done a lot of research on revaluations, and he's with us here today. He's done a lot of research in other counties, in neighboring counties, and looked at how their recent revals have occurred and projected how ours may occur when next year. Like, we're going through the reval process this coming year, right?
I've got to do a resolution. We're going to make sure to do the reval in be effective in 2024. We bring it to the board. We start on that process, and it will be effective, and those revenues will come in. Now, I say during the tax year of 24.
So for us, we'll see those revenues in our fiscal year 24-25. And if you look, that's when the revenue increases begin in that tax year 24-25. So the tax director has indicated to me that he expects to see a 10+% increase in revenue in the 24-25 fiscal year due to the revaluation.
When was our last reval?
60.
That's what I was thinking, 2006.
And we're required to do a reval every 8 years.
The council's on a 4-year cycle, but because that sales ratio has been up, we've saved that money and not had to do one. But our sales ratio right now is at 94.9, right at hitting 95, but I see it dropping. So when 24 comes in, we want to be up there and hit it then to be effective. And I'm looking according to other counties, like a next door neighbor went up last year. When they did their reval in effect last year, it went up 16%, but in the last year, it's jumped another 10 to 20% just in a year's time because of the influx of what's happening from Durham County coming in, people buying property.
So they've seen a roughly 30-some% increase.
That's correct.
So Thomas has said he's pretty confident that we will receive at least a 10% increase in our reval in revenues.
Plus we got that new place over there on 29, over on 700 Frito-Lay, that new distribution center. Should get a tax base off that.
Yeah.
And then we got the place up there on 87. They're gonna make furniture up there on Highway 87. Used to be the Williamsburg plant.
Yep, that's correct.
Mr. Miller, before we get into anything else, we've got several folks who'd like to take just a little break.
Sure.
If you don't mind, we'll break for about 5 minutes. Thank you. I'd like to bring the meeting back to order. Mr. Miller, if you will continue.
So Commissioners, I was explaining that the revenue, the tax director has told me that he expects a 10+% increase in revenues in the fiscal year 24-25. That equates to $1,078,036 at 10%. You can see the budgeted amount is $637,260.
What was the total again? 1 point what?
$1,078,036. The budgeted amount is $646,821, which is 6%. So I've pretty conservatively applied the revenue increase into this funding formula. And like the tax director said, our neighboring counties have seen upwards of 30% increases in the last couple of years between their revals and recent activity.
Well, let me drop it over in the middle of the conversation. Revenue increase 10%. That's translating into a 10% tax increase for everybody in the county
Well,
based upon the property values going up.
it is. But it's, when I started off the conversation, it's doing it the right way. Because the wrong way is simply to increase the tax rate. That's not the right way in every situation. It's necessary in certain situations. But what you're actually doing by doing this is increasing landowners' wealth. So you're taxing people equitably on the amount of property they have, but you are at the same time, their amount of wealth has increased because of some of the things that this board has done within the county, additional services. This board has worked hard, I think, to encourage broadband and internet providers to come in, and we're seeing that occur now, which will help drive property values up in Caswell County. A lot of people were hesitant to buy property in Caswell County because there was no high-speed internet available. I think this board has done a good job of driving home the point to internet service providers.
Oh, yeah, we've been reaching out, trying to get all the state funding we can have. But at the end of the day, you're still talking about people's taxes are going to go up by 10% if this increased revenue you're projecting is 10%. I mean, that's
true. So people's bottom line, the amount a person is worth or the person's property is worth will increase by 10% on average.
It will, but whether we raise their tax or not, the value of the property is the same. So it's not dependent on us putting it down on paper and charging them another 10%. I got to say, I'm not comfortable with doing that. And like I said, a lot of this will be talked about later on, but that's a heck of a lot of money to ask these people in the county that cough up. A lot of these people are under the same problems that we're talking about compensating the county employees for. They've got a 7% inflation rate. A lot of these elderly people on a fixed income, you're asking them just willy-nilly to pop up another 10% like it's just easy to do, and it's not. A lot of these people are strained.
Well, when I say that I think the property values will increase by more than 10% or 10%, which is what the tax director and I have discussed. It's what we've seen in neighboring counties. That's not something that we set. We don't make that determination.
But it's not automatically set in stone that just because the property value goes up, we've got to pass along to them a formula that's going to equate into them paying another 10% on top of what they paid last year.
You're exactly right. And that's why I only budgeted this at 6%. It's budgeted at 6%. And it's not, the whole 6% isn't even needed.
Again, we've got a lot to talk about at a future time. I don't want to tie it all up here. I'll let you get on with your presentation.
So, as I said, 6% is what it's budgeted at. The board may very well at that point in time decide that they want to drop the tax rate by 4% or whatever the board deems or 4 cents per $100 valuation, or however that equates at that point in time, based on the actual numbers that it's going to cost us to do this. and what the numbers are that we've seen at that point in time. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has about any of these things.
Well, so the main thing is you found the money to pay for it.
I think I've provided the board with a plan to pay for it without a tax increase.
Okay.
No, that's the most ludicrous thing I've heard. That is.
Without a tax rate increase.
Okay, but you're still bringing in more money out of the taxpayers' pockets in the county. You can put lipstick on a pig any way you want to. They are still paying more to that tune of $637,000 right there per year. However you want to dice it.
That's correct.
And I'll tell you, this is off subject a little bit. And I think, Brian, we got another year when Corey and you and I worked on that airport study, and I think we had 2 years, if I'm correct. But I think, economic development down the road, the board might want to consider that, because that can bring in a lot of money for the county. And it'd be 92 to 95% funded by the FAA. I think we've got another year out on it that we can do something. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Well, I don't have no big problem. I know we're behind with taxes. With salary. I know this. I lived here all my life pretty much. But my thing is right now, what I want to ask this vote and put this county manager. Anybody making $60,000 a year, we're gonna do not get a raise for this first year. I want to see these people at the bottom come up to $60,000. You could be making I'm making $6. We don't get no increase for the first year. I want to see this thing put in to bring them people up to where they're supposed to be using your plan. But at $60,000, they stop right there. And then next year, we see all these things that you said, we're gonna get this money, where we're gonna put it at. We can come back and adjust and add these people to this raise. That's my opinion, the way I feel. I feel like we won't be hurting nobody. I know we're gonna get $250,000 on the bill, right? We are guaranteed that. We can take that if we need more to get these people up in your same plan. Up to $60,000, not up to $60,000 more, you're not gonna get a raise. And now, can you work it out that way or kind of explain to me? We can come up with something like that for the first year. Now that's for 1 year to get these people on the go.
So, it's to the board's discretion about how they fund any plan, about how they fund anything that they do. What I think I have talked about is equitable distribution across the salary scale and about salary compression. What is being described would create inequities across the salary scale, and it would create salary compression in those $50,000 to $70,000 positions. So, we can put together anything the board wants us to put together. That is not consistent with the grade and salary plan, but we can do anything the board wants us to do.
I just think this is a way we can bring people at the bottom. There's a lot of people at the bottom not making it anyway.
Well,
So then you know that. It is, I don't know how they live.
I do. And that's one of the reasons that I showed you this slide that the people between $20,000 and $60,000 are already scheduled to get 94% of the money that would be paid out in the salary study.
Understood.
So there's only $80,000 additional, roughly $80,000 additional that would be left unspent. But here again, we can do anything the board would like us to do.
I understand where Commissioner Jeffries is coming from, and in that plan, what would the lowest salary for the county be under what you propose?
$30,000. My recommendation would be to move every county employee up to a minimum of $30,000, even those that weren't scheduled to receive increases to bring them to $30,000. And the amount that would take, if my recommendation were put in place, is $11,000. So it's not a big jump, right? There's not a big jump to be able to bring those employees up to $30,000 after the manager's recommendation is put in place. So I would recommend that we move everyone up to $30,000. Yeah, I'd recommend we move everyone up to $30,000
At a minimum.
at a minimum. And then move throughout the salary and grade scale as the consultants have proposed.
And you said we only be saving $80,000 go this way. That's what you're saying.
Well, people making more than $60,000 are only scheduled to receive 6% of the total of the salary study. So, and that's roughly $80,000, which is,
I'm just saying, we can do that for 1 year, and then we look at this thing, like here where we at right here, we can afford to go other steps.
well, so I can't speak to this myself personally. We may have some people in the room that can. But I have heard about salary studies that have been put in place in the past that basically did that exact same thing. And what happened was the board approved the first phase of that salary study, but never did the rest of it. So those employees that did not get the initial increase never received an increase at all. Am I remembering that right?
Well,
That's the way
I
remember
think-
it across the board,
I think
too.
so. I think you came and asked the board for $250,000 for increasing salary studies, and the board approved that amount, but I think that's what you're talking about, right?
No, that was before I became county manager.
Well, yeah, well, I know it's been, Jeremiah, you might remember, it's been 2 or 3 years, but I know that, Brian, I believe you was manager because, you came for the board, we had to vote, and you, it's $250,000 and the board approved.
Well, yeah, I remember something like that, but the incident that I was talking about happened before I was county manager.
Okay.
So even if we considered what you were speaking about, 14 employees roughly make right now, I believe, over $60,000.
Yeah,
$80,000 divided between how many employees are left.
yeah,
It's gonna be very minimal.
right.
Plus, you get the compression
Yeah.
and you kind of throw this whole thing to the wind.
You know, don't get me wrong, I'm concerned about some of the variables in this thing, but this is what the board asked for. We wanted a comprehensive pay plan. And you know, if we're not gonna do anything with this thing, we're gonna throw it out, then, you know, we waste another $20,000. if we're gonna move forward, we're gonna have to bite the bullet sometime. And we have an opportunity to bite the bullet, and hopefully none of these variables come and bite us in the backside. They could, absolutely. But, you know, I don't think we're gonna ever be in a position where that could not happen to us, personally.
Local governments are not immune from the economic pressures that small businesses and corporations see with downturns in the economy and, you know, inflation and everything else. So I would agree 100%.
When are we gonna vote on this Monday?
Well, I think that's up to the chairman.
Okay.
We'll see after this closed session.
You gonna vote on it today?
No,
Okay, good.
everybody needs to be thinking about this, mull this over for a little while, and we'll, after the closed session, we'll see even if we want to vote on it on Monday. We might want to hold it just a little bit longer.
Well, the reason I asked, because I've got to cut out about 11. I got Dallas today, so I gotta leave here about 11 o'clock.
Okay, well, I'm not planning on having a vote on it today,
Okay,
but we are
And
gonna go into a closed session that you'll need to be caught up on.
okay. And I just want to say one quick thing, because I've had some text messages from different ones. I've enjoyed working with the board. I'll be 16 years when I finish up in November, but I decided not to run again on account of health issues, get my health straightened out. So, but I've enjoyed working with the board and everything, and working with the county, and I'll continue to do so to the end of my term in November.
We certainly appreciate your support, Commissioner Carter.
Yeah, thank you for your service, Dave.
You got anything else?
No.
Any more questions for the county manager? If not, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to have the board go into closed session to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, condition of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee, which privilege is hereby acknowledged according to NCGS 143-318.11 subparagraph A, subparagraph 6.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion, is a second on the floor. We'll do roll call voting. Mr. Dickerson? Oh, it's not. Mr. Jeffries? Mr. Owen? Mr. Ostrander? Mr. Carter?
Aye.
And McVeigh, aye. Motion carries. We will now go into closed session. We're now sitting back in open session.
So Commissioners, I have just two more things with you real quick. I just want to let you know that Monday, I've spoken to you before about a deputy and assistant county manager. I want to talk with you more about that Monday at the upcoming commissioners meeting. I'm also going to talk to you about adding an additional position in our finance department on Monday at the commissioners meeting. That's all I have.
Any more questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor, Mr. Dickerson? Mr. Jeffries? Owen? Mr. Ostrander? Mr. McVeigh? Aye. We now sit adjourned. Thank you.